Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to get back to some of the roots of this channel. We're going to be exploring some cool DAX, and basically, well, I haven't posted it yet, but I will post it out there to the Quick Measures gallery because even though it's kind of a variation on something I've done before, I think it's a pretty interesting variation, and well, we'll get into it. All right, so the subject for today came out of the forums by this user here. I'm not sure if that's MS Cop user or MSC Op user, or I don't know, but this guy, current streak for subject. And basically it's just some data, and there's a better data set that this, I don't know if he or she, but this individual provides. Basically, they have some kind of project that they're working on, a sub project, and they're keeping track of it by day, and they want to know the current streak, like how many days in a row that they have, you know, done something with that project or with that sub project. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So anyway, turns out that this person actually messaged me on Gmail, but just FYI, that is a terrible way to get a hold of me. Okay, number one, it's a miracle I ever saw this email. Because my Gmail account is the one I use whenever I go out and read a white paper and they make you enter in your information and all that sort of stuff, right? I've got a fake phone number and my Gmail address, right, is what I use, so I don't get bothered by these people. Because I don't want to hear from them. I just want to read the white paper. Okay. Uh, so I always give them, the Gmail address is legit, but I'm not going to give them my phone number. That's crazy. I'm just going to get telemarketer calls. So anyway, sorry if you get my phone calls. If I accidentally put in your phone number when I'm putting in fake phone numbers, I apologize if it's yours. But better you than me, I figured. All right, so now this technique to solve this involves our good friend, our old friend Cthulhu, as it were. And I wrote this. I guess I should have recognized. I guess and I didn't know really what to call this. Repeating counter indexer thing. Whatever. But so I called it Cthulhu because it about drove me nuts when I originally created this. And this is like 6 years ago that I created this. And it shows in the DAX, man. I mean, that DAX is bad. So this is kind of a chance for me to kind of revisit Cthulhu and kind of give myself a little layer, at least some measure of redemption for how bad the DAX code was. But I called it Cthulhu. It about drove me nuts. I mean, insane trying to solve the problem. Because basically what Cthulhu does is it looks at this grouping based upon the index is the order, and based upon it wants to find repeating every time that this repeats, it increments by one, right, until it changes, so it restarts the counter at one, 1 2. So really it's a fantastic tool for finding streaks, which I guess I should have probably recognized at the time. But as you can see, the DAX code is really bad. I've even got like one of the most horrific sins you can do in DAX, which is just wrap calculate around a DAX function for no good reason, right? And there's no good reason to have calculate in here. So you can see how old this is because I was actually using calculate and using calculate poorly, as it were. But this post has always surprised me. I mean, it's like one of the most viewed posts within the Quick Measure gallery. It's almost up to 30,000 views now, which is a lot for the Quick Measure gallery. And I really didn't have any idea. I figured this was like a one-off, the person basically like, well, if you need this, you're like the second person to need this because the only other person is this guy that posted the original question. But turns out I have come back to Cthulhu again and again and again to solve real-world problems. And today is no exception. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll show you this little guy right there. Just as for fun, if you think I just create memes around DAX totals, then you'd be wrong. I am just much of a smartass in other aspects of my life as well. So if you stick around to the end, I'll demo that. All right, so let's take a look at the code behind this, the DAX code. Nope, that's pseudo recursion. That might be another video. Okay, so here I've got the data loaded up. And the data table here it is. So we've got our project, we've got our sub-project. This is like a client. I didn't do anything with that. I'm using start time here, or start date, I should say, for my index, if you will. So earlier, so it's a little bit of a variation on Cthulhu, because in Cthulhu I had an index. In this case, I'm using date. And so I created a longest streak by project, a longest streak by sub-project, and a current streak by sub-project. So let's take a look at the first one that I created, which is the longest streak by sub-project. So as you can see, the code is quite long, but let's take a look at this. So the first thing I'm going to do, I create these as measures. So I grab my sub-project, right? I then grab my min date, max date. Now I probably didn't have to do the all with the subject projects equal to sub-project, and use min x and max x. I could have probably just used max, of my date, of my start date, and min of my start date, but I wasn't quite sure like how I was going to use these in the visuals, other than I needed to have sub-project in there. But I was thinking, anyway, doesn't matter. That might be a little bit overkill, but too bad. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a table, and we're going to use calendar to create a table between our min date and our max date. We're then going to add a column called count, __ count in this case. So I grab my date, my current date in a var, and then my result is and I do a count rows here, and I filter all of the table where the start date equals the date and the sub-projects equals the sub-project, right? So that's either why I'm using an if statement here versus just using count rows, because the data actually included 2 entries on the same date for the same sub-project. And if we just use count rows, we might get like a 1, we might get a 2, we might get a 0. So I didn't want that, because we want to either basically just have a 0 or a 1. Did it happen or did it not happen on that date? So I just use an if, if the count rows basically comes back, it's not 0 or blank, which means false, then I'm just going to tag it with a 1. And if it is 0 or false or whatever, I'm going to return a 0. So now what I'm going to have is a table of every date between the min and max dates for that sub-project. And it's either going to have 1, something happened on the date, or 0, nothing happened on that date. So now we can create table 1 var, which basically is add columns table to the table we created above, right? We're going to add our Cthulhu column. And so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my index, which I'm using date for my index. And then for my group, I'm going to use my count that I created. Remember, it's either 1 or 0. So the rest of it then basically is Cthulhu through and through, where I add the columns, right? I create my temp table where I filter, where it's the group and the date is less than the index. And then I create my add columns with my diff. I'm not going to go into the whole explanation of Cthulhu here. In fact, I need to probably get out of here, scroll down, get in here. Yeah. All right. But basically, this is Cthulhu, only updated where it doesn't have the stupid calculate, right? Because it doesn't need it. And so calculate doesn't appear anywhere in this formula anymore. And it's definitely cleaned up. Instead of like nested if statements down here at the result, I'm using a switch true, which is better. But basically, what Cthulhu is then going to do what Cthulhu does, right? It's going to count up. So if it's sitting on a 1 row, and the previous 3 rows are also 1, it's going to show a 3, and then there's a 0. It's going to show a 3 on there, because there were 3 consecutive rows with 1, as it were. So at that point, right, if I want the longest streak, I just need to do a max x of where I filter that table where the count is not equal to 0, and return to the Cthulhu column, and that is what gives me my longest streak. So as you can see here, my longest streak here is 4 for Wanakani. Japanese pod 101 is 3, 1, 1, 1, and the blank is also 1. So now that's the longest streak. What about current streak? Current streak is very, very, well, first let's take a look at longest streak by project. Now, as you can imagine, longest streak by project is incredibly similar. All you do is you replace any reference to project, sub-project with project, right? So there you go. You replace those 3 right there, and now you have it converted to project, and now it works at the project level versus the sub-project level. All right, current streak. What's that one look like? It's incredibly similar. So in this case, what I do is current, I'm defining current in this case as the maximum start date within the data set. You could also do it as today, however your data is structured or whatever. But basically, you need to know what that is. So basically, I still created subproject. Instead of my max date, I'm doing the max date of all the data table, grabbing the max start date, right? So that is really all that changes until, well, where'd my mouse go? It's somewhere. Oh, my mouse is gone. I don't know what's going. There it is. Escape Rig. Okay, down here, really the other piece of it is, so what I do then is instead of basically returning the max of the Cthulhu, essentially the Cthulhu column, what I first do is I grab the max X of the count on the max date, right? So I'm grabbing the count on the max date. If the count is 0, then I'm going to return 0 because there is no, basically the current streak is 0. You didn't do anything, on the current date. Otherwise, I'm going to grab the max X of Cthulhu on that specific date and return that back. And that'll be my current streak versus my longest streak, right? Because I'm grabbing it on the current date. And so if I do that, then you can see here it's a little different. The current streak for this is 0, 0. This is 1, which happens to correspond with the longest streak. This one's 0 versus the longest streak is 1. This is 3, which happens to be the current streak, the longest streak, and the current streak here is 4, which is also the longest streak within the data set. Okay. I will get this out into the quick measure gallery. I got to find an image for it. That's always the toughest part about getting things out into the quick measure gallery. And if you stuck around this long, then I need to show you. I'm really proud of this meme. I like this meme. I think this meme is funny. And it's timely. So whenever you think your favorite artist is the biggest sellout ever, just remember, Ice-T then, Ice-T now. I just watched this Cane's commercial. And I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my God, that's Ice-T. And a little tiny man in a cup of iced tea from Cane's. And I love Cane's. And I love Cane's sweet tea. But that's just too much iced tea. I'm sorry, man. I mean, yeah, I didn't really ever have respect for you anyway, but if I had, it would be completely gone now. Anyway, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.